A group of bikers mocked a teenage girl's jacket until they noticed the patch that silenced every one of them. A 15-year-old girl walks into an Arizona diner wearing a leather jacket 3 sizes too big. The bikers laugh. Their leader grabs her collar and tells her to take it off. But then, someone spots the patch on the back. A name every rider in that room knows. A name that belongs to the man who once rode through fire to save their lives. Now she's walking 50 miles through the desert to keep a promise to her dead father. But someone powerful doesn't want her to get there. And the bikers who mocked her? They're about to learn what that jacket really carries. What was she running from? Who's trying to stop her? And what happens when 300 riders learn the truth? Before we begin, drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from today. The heat came off the asphalt in waves thick enough to see. Route 89A shimmered like a mirage south of Cottonwood, and the only thing moving on the shoulder was a girl. 15 years old, small for her age, walking north with a backpack held together by duct tape and sheer stubbornness. Maya Dawson hadn't eaten since yesterday morning. The Cactus Flat diner appeared around a bend like a promise. Sun-bleached stucco, a crooked neon sign that read, "Open," in letters that hadn't all worked at the same time in years, and a gravel parking lot crowded with chrome. 8 motorcycles lined up like soldiers. Harleys mostly, heavy iron ridden by heavy men. Maya pushed through the glass door and the air conditioning hit her like a wall. She stood for a moment, letting her eyes adjust, scanning the room the way her father had taught her. Exits first, then faces. 2 truckers at a window booth. A waitress behind the counter, heavy set with a pencil behind her ear and compression stockings visible below her apron. And in the back half of the diner, filling it with noise and leather and the smell of engine grease, 8 members of the Iron Aces Motorcycle Club. Their president sat at the center of the longest table, Duke Harlan, late 40s, barrel-chested, with a gray-streaked beard and a silver ring on his right hand that caught the fluorescent light every time he gestured, which was often. Duke was a man built for taking up space, and he used every inch of it. Maya slid onto a counter stool. She unzipped her backpack, pulled out a crumpled fold of dollar bills, and counted them twice. She ordered a cup of soup. The jacket swallowed her. Her father's leather riding jacket, scarred, oil-stained, the sleeves rolled twice at the cuffs, the hem brushing her thighs. On a grown man, it would have looked worn. On Maya, it looked like a costume, and Duke Harlan noticed. "Hey!" His voice carried across the diner like he owned it. "Hey, sweetheart, you lose a bet, or did your boyfriend forget his jacket?" Laughter from the back table. The kind of laughter men produce when their leader has pointed at a target. Maya didn't turn around. She picked up her spoon. Duke stood. His boots were loud on the linoleum. "I'm talking to you, kid." He crossed the diner in 4 strides and stopped behind her stool, close enough that she could smell cigarettes and cheap cologne. "Leather's earned, sweetheart, not inherited. You want to play dress-up? Do it at home." His crew howled. Donna, the waitress, looked away. Her hand tightened around the coffee pot, but she said nothing. Maya ate her soup. Her hands did not shake. Duke leaned closer. He flicked the collar of the jacket with 2 fingers, the way you'd flick a bug off a tablecloth. "Take it off before you embarrass real riders." Maya's eyes flashed, a single hot instant of fury, but her mouth stayed shut. She swallowed another spoonful. Duke reached for the jacket, and then a hand caught his wrist. Cal Rennick, 23, the youngest member at the table, the prospect still earning his patch, had crossed the room without anyone noticing. His face was white. His eyes were locked on the back of Maya's jacket, on the faded patch stitched between the shoulder blades, a hand-embroidered emblem of a winged wheel wreathed in desert flame, the Devil's Canyon Riders, and beneath it, in block letters that had been sewn with the kind of care only love produces, Sergeant Jack Ironside Dawson. Cal's voice came out barely above a whisper. "Duke, look at the patch." The diner went silent. Duke looked. He let go of Maya's collar like the leather had burned him. His hand dropped to his side. His mouth opened, then closed, then opened again, and nothing came out. Every biker in that room knew the name: Sergeant Jack Dawson, United States Marine Corps, 2 tours in Afghanistan, founding member of the Devil's Canyon Riders, Flagstaff chapter, the man who, 12 years ago on a July night, when a brush fire jumped Route 89 and turned a stretch of highway into a corridor of flame, rode his Harley through the fire line to reach a 3-bike wreck. 3 Iron Aces members, pinned, bleeding, surrounded by burning scrub. Jack pulled all 3 out, burned his hand so badly he couldn't grip a throttle for 6 months. One of the men he saved was Tommy Harlan, Duke's brother. Jack Dawson died of lung cancer 2 years ago, and the girl sitting at this counter eating soup she'd paid for with her last crumpled bills was wearing his jacket. The color drained from Duke's face in stages. Confusion first, then recognition, then a shame so heavy it bent his shoulders. He took a step back. His crew had gone quiet. Even the truckers by the window were watching. "I didn't," Duke started. Maya set her spoon down. She didn't turn around. Duke tried again. His voice had lost all its theater. "Kid, I didn't know. Let me buy your dinner. Whatever you want." "I have soup," Maya said. "A ride, then. Where are you headed? We'll take you." Now she turned. Her brown eyes were steady, dry, and absolutely cold. She looked at him the way you look at something you've already decided isn't worth being angry at. "I don't need anything from you." She turned back to her soup. Duke stood there like a man who'd been slapped with an open hand and knew he deserved it. It was Donna who finally reached her. The waitress refilled Maya's water without being asked, set a wrapped packet of crackers beside the bowl, and leaned against the counter with the unhurried patience of a woman who'd spent 30 years reading people across that same stretch of Formica. "Long walk from wherever you started, honey," Donna said. "Where you headed?" Maya was quiet for a long time, then so softly that Duke had to lean forward to hear it from where he stood, frozen 3 feet away. "Flagstaff. The Devil's Canyon rally. They're honoring my dad this year." "That's 50 miles, Donna said gently. "I know how far it is." "You walking the whole way?" Maya's jaw tightened. Something shifted behind her eyes. Not tears, but the effort of holding them back. "My foster father sold my dad's motorcycle 3 weeks ago, a 2004 Sportster. Sold it to a dealer in Camp Verde for $1,800 to cover what he owed. Then he told me I couldn't go to the rally." She paused. "So I left." Donna's hand stilled on the counter. Duke looked like a man watching his own reflection do something unforgivable. Maya finished her soup, picked up her backpack, and walked out into the evening without looking at anyone. The door swung shut behind her. Through the window, they watched her cross the parking lot, step onto the gravel shoulder, and start walking north. Duke hadn't moved. His crew sat in silence. The ring on his hand, the Iron Aces emblem, caught the light, and for the first time in years, it felt heavy. Cal appeared beside him. The young prospect's voice was quiet but certain. "I'm going after her, not to talk, just to make sure she's safe." Duke nodded. He couldn't speak yet. Cal walked out, swung a leg over his bike, and pulled onto the highway heading north, keeping his distance, a 1/4 mile back. Just a headlight in the growing dark. Duke pulled out his phone. His hands were not steady. He scrolled to a name he hadn't called in months and pressed dial. Madre Elena Reyes answered on the second ring. "Elena," Duke said. His voice cracked on the name. "It's Duke Harlan. I need to tell you something, and you're going to want to sit down. Jack Dawson's daughter is walking to Flagstaff alone, and I just did something I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to fix." The line was silent for 3 seconds. When Madre Elena spoke, her voice was the calm of deep water. "Tell me everything." Dawn came gold and pink over the Sedona Ridge, and Maya was already walking. She'd slept 4 hours in a dry wash behind a gas station, her backpack under her head, the jacket spread over her like a blanket. She woke before the sun, splashed water on her face from an outdoor spigot, filled her bottle, and started north on 89A with the sky still bruised purple at the edges. The jacket was tied around her waist now. The morning air was cool, but it wouldn't last. By 10 o'clock, the asphalt would be throwing heat again, and she'd be rationing water. She knew this. Her father had taught her how to read a road the way other fathers taught their kids to read books. She could hear him, even now. 8-year-old Maya, kneeling beside a Sportster in their driveway in Cottonwood, Jack's big hands guiding her small ones around a tire valve. Check the pressure before you check anything else, baby girl. A rider who can't fix her own bike isn't a rider. She's a passenger. Maya had never been a passenger in her life. She walked with purpose. Not fast, not slow. The steady pace of someone who understood that 50 miles was a matter of discipline, not speed. She kept to the shoulder. She watched for snakes. She counted mile markers the way her father had taught her to count cadence. At 9:15, she heard the motorcycle. It came from behind, a single engine mid-weight, holding steady about a quarter-mile back. She didn't turn around. She already knew who it was. The kid from the diner. The one who'd grabbed Duke's wrist. He'd been back there since last night, she was almost sure. A shadow with a headlight. Now the engine grew louder. He was closing the distance. Cal pulled his bike alongside her on a straight, empty stretch. He killed the throttle to idle speed and matched her walking pace, his worn boots inches from the pavement. He looked nervous. His hands fidgeted on the grips. "Morning," he said. Maya didn't look at him. "I told your boss I don't need anything. He's not my boss, and I'm not here for him." Cal swallowed. "Madre Elena Reyes asked me to ride open. She didn't want you thinking you had a shadow. She wanted you to know you've got backup if you need it. That's all." Maya stopped walking. She turned and looked at him fully for the first time. He was young, not much older than some of the guys at her high school, with a patchy beard that wasn't fooling anyone, and boots so worn the soles were separating from the uppers. He looked like someone trying very hard to be something he wasn't sure he was yet. "I've been taking care of myself since I was 13, she said. "I don't need a biker club to start now." Cal nodded. He didn't argue. He didn't try to convince her. He just said, "I'll stay back, quarter-mile." "You won't even see me." Maya stared at him for a long moment. Then she turned and kept walking. Cal dropped back, true to his word. A distant rumble, a speck in her mirrors if she'd had any, present but not pressing, a safety net she hadn't asked for and wouldn't acknowledge. 2 hours later, she reached a gas station outside Camp Verde, a rusted canopy, 2 pumps, a faded sign advertising ice and bait, and beneath the canopy, a young woman in a fast food uniform leaning against a sedan that wasn't going anywhere. A toddler on her hip, phone in her hand held up toward the sky like she was searching for a signal that didn't exist. Maya slowed. The woman, Rosa, mid-20s, dark circles under her eyes, a name tag pinned crooked on her chest, looked up with the expression of someone who'd already accepted that the universe wasn't going to help. "Car won't start," Rosa said, not to Maya specifically, to anyone, to no one. Maya dropped her backpack by the pump. She walked to the sedan, leaned under the hood Rosa had already popped, and found it in 30 seconds. A battery cable jarred loose, the terminal green with corrosion. She pulled a rag from her pack, cleaned the contact, and tightened the cable with her fingers until it held. She stepped back. "Try it now." Rosa turned the key. The engine caught. Rosa's face crumpled, not with sadness, but with the overwhelming relief of a person who'd been one more problem away from breaking. "Oh my God, thank you. What do I owe you?" "Nothing." "No, please. Let me give you something." Maya reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded $5 bill and 4 quarters, every cent she had left. She held it out. Rosa stared at the money. "I can't take that." "You've got a kid," Maya said. "Buy her something to eat." She put the money on the passenger seat before Rosa could refuse, picked up her backpack, and walked back to the road. A quarter-mile behind her, Cal sat on his idling bike. He'd watched the whole thing. He pulled out his phone and called Duke. "She just gave a stranger her last $6, Cal said. "This kid? Duke? This kid is something else." He hung up and followed Maya north. The road stretched ahead of her, long and dry and merciless, and she walked it like she'd been walking it her whole life. because she had. Duke Harlan wore a groove in the clubhouse floor, back and forth, boots heavy on concrete, phone in one hand, the other clenching and unclenching at his side like it was looking for something to hit. The Iron Aces Prescott chapter house smelled like stale coffee and motor oil, and 3 of his guys sat at the bar watching him pace, smart enough not to say a word. Cal's call had come in 20 minutes ago. Duke had listened without interrupting. The gas station, the young mother with the dead car, the toddler on her hip. How Maya had fixed the cable in half a minute flat. How she'd reached into her pocket, pulled out her last $6 and handed it over like it was nothing. Like giving away everything she had was just what you did. Duke had hung up and stood very still for a long time. Then he'd picked up the phone again and called his brother. Tommy answered on the 3rd ring. Duke could hear the TV in the background, Karen's voice in another room, the ordinary sounds of a house where people were safe and warm and fed. Tommy still walked with a limp from the wreck. The wreck Jack Dawson had ridden through, fire to reach. Duke told him everything. The diner, the jacket, the patch. The girl walking 50 miles to Flagstaff because her foster father had sold her dead dad's motorcycle and told her she couldn't go. The silence on Tommy's end lasted 4 seconds. When he spoke, his voice was a blade. "You mocked Ironside's kid?" "Tommy, Jack Dawson pulled me out of a burning truck, Duke. He burned his hands so bad he couldn't hold a fork for 3 months. And you stood over his daughter in a diner and told her to take off his jacket?" Duke closed his eyes. "I know." "You don't know. You don't know anything yet." Tommy's voice cracked. "Get Karen on the line. She'll find out what's happening in that foster home. And Duke, you fix this, whatever it takes." Karen Harlan was a child welfare advocate. She knew how the system worked, where to pull, and what to look for. Within 2 hours, she had a picture none of them were ready for. Gerald Pruitt, licensed foster parent, Cottonwood. 3 children in his care. Maya had been the 3rd until she ran. State stipend, $950 per month per child. $2,850 a month in government money. Karen cross-referenced public records and found gambling debts north of $6,000. She confirmed the motorcycle sale. Jack's 2004 Harley Sportster, sold to a dealer in Camp Verde for $1,800 3 weeks ago. "The kids in that house are fed, technically," Karen told Duke over the phone. Her voice was steady, but her anger wasn't hidden. "But that's about all they are." There was more. Pruitt had filed a missing child report on Maya 2 days ago. He described her as unstable and a flight risk. That meant any law enforcement officer in Yavapai County could pick her up and return her to him. Duke felt something cold settle in his chest, not guilt anymore, something harder. He called Madre Elena Reyes. He told her everything Karen had found, the stipends, the debts, the sale, the missing child report. He told her about the gas station, about Maya giving her last dollar to a stranger. He told her that Jack Dawson's daughter was sleeping on the side of a highway because the man the state had trusted to care for her had sold her dead father's bike for gambling money. Madre Elena listened the way she always listened, completely, without interruption, absorbing every word like intelligence from the field. When Duke finished, the line was quiet for 3 beats. Then she spoke. "I'm calling my attorney tonight, and I'm calling DCS in the morning." Her voice was calm, but Duke had been around long enough to know what calm sounded like when it was holding back a storm. Dusk came in layers, orange, then copper, then a purple so deep it looked like a bruise spreading across the sky. Maya found her shelter just before the light gave out completely, a concrete drainage culvert beneath an overpass on Route 89A, just south of Rimrock. 3 feet high, 4 feet wide, dry as bone. She'd slept in worse. She crawled inside, shrugged off her backpack, and unrolled the thin blanket she'd carried since Cottonwood. The backpack became a pillow. The jacket, her father's jacket, she spread over her body like a second skin, the leather cracked and warm from the day's heat. She pressed her face into the collar and breathed in. Motor oil, faint, road dust, and beneath it, so faded she had to search for it, the ghost of her father's cologne. Something cheap he'd bought at the drugstore and worn every day like it was expensive. The smell was almost gone now. Another few months and it would disappear entirely, and she'd have nothing left of him but the leather itself. Maya stared at the curved concrete ceiling and let the memories come. Jack Dawson had been diagnosed on a Tuesday. Lung cancer. Stage 3 already spreading. He'd sat Maya down at the kitchen table in their little house in Cottonwood, the one with the carport where they'd rebuilt a transmission together the summer she was 12, and he'd told her straight. No softening. No lies. Jack didn't believe in lying to his kid. He kept riding as long as he could. Weekends on the Sportster, Maya on the back with her arms around his waist, the Arizona desert unrolling in every direction like the world had been made just for them. When he got too weak to ride, he sat in the carport and talked her through maintenance. Brake pads, oil changes, chain tension. Like he was downloading everything he knew into her before the clock ran out. The last thing he made her promise, the very last thing, 3 days before the end, his hand on hers, his grip so weak she could barely feel it, was the rally. You show up for your people, Maya, even when it costs you. Every year, you go to Flagstaff and you stand with the chapter. You promise me. She'd promised. Her mother, Linda, had died when Maya was 9, an aneurysm. There one moment, gone the next, like someone had flipped a switch. Jack had raised her alone after that on a mechanic's salary, never remarried, never complained. When he died, the state had placed her with the only available licensed foster home in the area, Gerald Pruitt's house. Maya pulled the jacket tighter around her shoulders. The concrete was cooling fast beneath her. Somewhere outside, a coyote called. One long, thin note that hung in the air and faded. "I'm coming, Dad," she whispered. "I promised." The words disappeared into the dark. No answer came. None ever did. But she said it anyway, every night, because the saying was the point. The promise was the thread, and as long as she held it, he wasn't entirely gone. Half a mile up the road, Cal Rennick sat on his idling motorcycle beneath a streetlight that buzzed and flickered. He pulled out his phone and typed a message to Madre Elena. "She's safe. Sleeping under the 89A overpass." The reply came in 12 seconds. "Hold position. Legal is moving." Cal pocketed the phone, killed the engine, and settled in. Above the culvert, above the overpass, above the whole broken and beautiful mess of it, the stars came out. Thick and bright and indifferent, the way they always are in the Arizona desert when nobody's watching. But somebody was watching. And by morning, Maya Dawson would find out. Maya spotted him from 100 yards out, an old man on the shoulder of the road just past Rimrock, white hair under a sun-bleached VFW ball cap, a sedan with its hazards blinking, and a flat tire he had no business trying to change. His hands shook so badly the lug wrench kept slipping from his grip. He was on one knee in the gravel, breathing hard, and he hadn't even gotten the first nut loose. Maya didn't slow down to think about it. She dropped her backpack, walked to the car, and knelt beside him. "I got it," she said. Harold, that was the name stitched on his cap, looked at her with the startled expression of a man who'd already accepted he was going to be stuck here for hours. Maya took the wrench from his trembling hands, braced her weight, and cracked the first lug nut in one clean pull. The second, third, fourth, and fifth followed in under a minute. She had the spare mounted and torqued before Harold had fully processed what was happening. She stood, brushed gravel from her knees, and handed back the wrench. Harold stared at her. Then he reached for his wallet. "No, sir," Maya said. "At least let me." "I don't need money. Water would be good, though. And if you've got anything to eat." He gave her a bottle of water and a granola bar from his glove box. His eyes were wet, and not from the sun. He looked at her. Really looked. The way people do when they recognize something true. "Your folks raised you right," he said. Maya's throat tightened. She took a breath. "Just my dad. And yeah, he did." She shouldered her pack and walked on. Harold watched her go, shaking his head slowly, the way people do when the world surprises them by being better than they expected. 1 hour later, the surprise was gone. The state trooper's cruiser appeared behind her first as a shimmer, then as a shape, then as a hard reality pulling onto the shoulder 20 feet ahead. The door opened. A uniformed officer stepped out, mid-30s, professional, mirrored sunglasses, one hand resting near his belt out of habit. "Ma'am, I need you to stop." Maya stopped. Her heart was pounding, but her face gave nothing away. She'd learned that from Jack, too. You don't let them see what you're feeling. You stand still, and you wait. "I got a call from a store clerk back in Rimrock. You match the description of a missing minor. Maya Dawson, 15, out of Cottonwood." He studied her. "That you?" Maya said nothing. "There's a report filed by your legal guardian, Gerald Pruitt. He says you're a flight risk and should be returned home immediately." The word home hit her like a slap. Pruitt's house had never been home. Home was a carport in Cottonwood with a man who smelled like engine grease and drugstore cologne, and that home was gone forever. "I need to take you in," the trooper said. Not unkindly, but firmly. Maya's jaw clenched. Her hands curled into fists at her sides. She could see it unfolding. The back of the cruiser, the drive south, Pruitt's front door, his rehearsed concern for the caseworker who would never come. She'd be back in that house by nightfall, and she'd never make Flagstaff. Then the trooper's radio crackled. He held up a finger. "Wait," and stepped back to the cruiser. He leaned in, listened. His posture shifted. He asked a question she couldn't hear. He listened again. Then he straightened, removed his sunglasses, and walked back to her. "Yavapai County Sheriff's Office just relayed a message from an attorney representing a—" He checked his notes. "Colonel Elena Reyes, retired USMC. A formal welfare concern has been raised regarding the Pruitt household. You're not to be returned pending review." Maya blinked. She didn't understand. Not fully, not yet. Someone had made a call. Someone with authority, with a title, with the kind of weight that made a state trooper change his mind on the side of a highway. "You're free to go," the trooper said. He gave her a long, measured look. "But be careful out here." Maya nodded. She adjusted her pack. She walked. Her hands were shaking now, not from fear, from the strange, unfamiliar sensation of discovering that somewhere out there, someone she'd never met was fighting for her. A quarter-mile behind her, parked at a gravel pull-off with his helmet on his knee, Cal Rennick watched the cruiser pull away. He let out a breath he'd been holding for 5 minutes. Then he started his engine and followed her north. Madre Elena's attorney filed the formal welfare complaint with Arizona DCS at 9:14 in the morning. By noon, Karen Harlan had emailed the supporting documentation. Stipend records, gambling debts, the motorcycle sale, 2 years of minimal compliance inspection notes that told a story no one had bothered to read. The legal machinery was moving. But Duke Harlan wasn't a man who waited for lawyers. He sent 2 of his guys to Camp Verde. The dealer's name was Mitch, a sunburned man in a corrugated metal shop who'd bought a 2004 Harley Sportster from a soft-bodied guy in a polo shirt 3 weeks ago for $1,800 cash and hadn't asked a single question about where it came from. Mitch wanted $2,400 for it now, $600 in markup for a dead man's motorcycle. Duke's guys paid it. Cash. No negotiation. They loaded the Sportster onto a flatbed trailer and drove it to the Iron Aces Prescott Clubhouse, where Duke was waiting with a chamois cloth and a can of chrome polish. He spent 2 hours with that bike, cleaning it, checking the chain tension, the tire pressure, the brake lines, all the things he imagined Jack Dawson would have checked himself. The leather seat was cracked but intact. The pipes had a patina that only comes from years of real riding. This was not a showpiece. This was a bike that had been loved by a man who knew what it was for. Duke loaded it onto his trailer, strapped it down, covered it with a tarp. 300 miles south, in a house in Cottonwood that smelled like stale beer and microwave dinners, Gerald Pruitt was on the phone with DCS. His voice was perfect, warm, measured, laced with just the right amount of parental worry. He told the caseworker he was devastated that Maya had run. He said he'd done everything he could. He asked if there were any updates on her location. The trooper's office had mentioned Rimrock. He hung up. The mask dropped. Marcus was in the kitchen doorway, 11 years old, thin, watching with the careful stillness of a boy who'd learned to read the weather of a room before entering it. Sophie stood behind him, 8, smaller, one hand gripping the back of her brother's shirt. Pruitt's jaw tightened. "What are you looking at?" Both children flinched, not dramatically, just a small, practiced contraction, shoulders drawing inward, eyes dropping to the floor. The flinch of children who'd been yelled at enough times to develop a reflex for it. "That girl is going to ruin everything," Pruitt muttered, turning away. He didn't see their faces. He never did. Back in Prescott, Duke's phone buzzed. Madre Elena's voice was flat and hard. "You mocked that girl, so now you're going to make it right or I'll come for you next." "I'm already rolling," Duke said. "Harley's on the trailer. 6 of my guys are riding with me." "Good. I'll see you in Flagstaff." At sunset, the convoy pulled onto I-17 northbound, 6 iron aces in formation, Chrome catching the last orange light, and behind them Duke's truck pulling a trailer with a tarp-covered motorcycle that meant more than any of them could say. They rode through the darkening desert toward Flagstaff, toward a rally, toward a girl none of them had earned the right to help, but who they were going to help anyway. Because sometimes that's all redemption is. Showing up for someone you failed, even when they haven't asked you to. Maya's feet were bleeding. She'd wrapped them in strips torn from the blanket she'd slept on. Her socks had given out somewhere past Rimrock, and the blisters had blistered on top of blisters until the pain became background noise, just another thing her body was doing while her mind focused on the only thing that mattered. 5 miles. 5 miles to the Flagstaff Fairgrounds. 3 days of walking. 50 miles of asphalt, gravel, dust, and desert sun. And now the end was close enough to taste. She could see the outskirts of Flagstaff ahead, buildings rising out of the pine-studded plateau, like a city in a dream. The jacket was back on. It was too hot for leather. Mid-morning, sun already high, but she wore it anyway. She was arriving in her father's jacket. That was not negotiable. Cal pulled alongside her for the last time. He didn't speak right away. He rolled at walking speed, engine murmuring, one boot dragging the pavement. He looked tired, too. 2 nights sleeping on his bike, eating gas station food, watching a girl from a distance, and reporting to people who cared about her more than she knew. 5 miles, he said finally. Maya kept walking. "I know you don't want to hear this." Cal's hands fidgeted on the grips, that nervous habit he'd never outgrown. "But I aged out of the Arizona foster system when I was 18. No family, no money, nobody waiting for me on the other side. I slept in my car for 3 months before the Iron Aces took me in." He paused. "They were the first people who treated me like I mattered." Maya's stride slowed. She didn't look at him, but she was listening. He could tell. "I know what it costs to keep walking when the world wants you to stop," Cal said. "And I know what it costs to let somebody help." Silence. Just the engine and the wind and the sound of Maya's torn-up shoes on the shoulder. She stopped. Cal stopped. Maya looked at him. Really looked. The way she'd looked at Harold. The way she'd looked at Rosa. Measuring. Deciding. She saw the patchy beard, the peeling boots, the nervous hands. She saw the kid he'd been, and something in her chest, something she'd held locked and armored for 2 years, shifted. Not broke, just shifted. 5 miles? She said. Cal nodded. Maya climbed onto the back of his bike. She didn't say thank you. She didn't need to. Cal felt her hands grip the sides of his jacket. Light, uncertain, the grip of someone who hadn't held onto another person in a very long time. And he pulled onto the road. They rode the last 5 miles in silence. The pines thickened around them, the air cooled, and Flagstaff opened up ahead like a promise kept. The fairground gates appeared. Cal slowed. Maya saw it all at once. 300 motorcycles filling the lot in gleaming rows, banners strung between poles, vendor tents, the rumble of engines and the hum of voices. And on the stage at the center of the grounds, a banner 30 feet wide with a photograph she knew better than her own face. Sergeant Jack, Ironside Dawson, remembering a rider who never left anyone behind. Maya swung off the bike, both feet on the ground, her eyes filled. Hot, sudden, unstoppable. She whispered it so quietly that only Cal could hear. "I made it, Dad." Maya walked through the grounds like she was walking through a dream. Everywhere she looked. Leather, chrome, sunlight on metal, the low thunder of voices that had been raised in bars and lowered in churches and belonged to men and women who understood what a motorcycle meant. The smell of barbecue smoke and engine grease and pine sap from the trees ringing the fairground, music playing somewhere, a child on someone's shoulders, and then they started noticing the jacket. A woman in a Devil's Canyon rider's vest stopped mid-sentence, looked at the patch on Maya's back, and put her hand over her mouth. A bearded man in a bandana touched Maya's shoulder as she passed. Didn't say a word, just touched her shoulder and nodded, his eyes bright. 2 riders at a picnic table stood up when she walked by. One of them said quietly to the other, "That's Ironside's patch." Maya kept walking. Her throat was tight. Her hands were shaking. She found a folding chair near the front of the stage and 300 riders stared at a 15-year-old girl. Maya stood at the center of the stage with her father's jacket hanging off her shoulders like it was holding her up. The lights were too bright. The silence was too loud. She could feel every pair of eyes in that crowd landing on the patch between her shoulder blades, reading the name, connecting the story. Madre Elena's arm settled around her, steady, warm, the arm of a woman who'd held soldiers together in worse moments than this. She turned to the crowd. "This is Maya Dawson," she said, "Jack's daughter. She is 15 years old. 3 days ago, she walked out of a foster home in Cottonwood and started walking to this rally, 50 miles, because her foster parent told her she couldn't come." The crowd was still. Madre Elena let the stillness build. "His name is Gerald Pruitt. He's a licensed foster parent in Cottonwood, Arizona. He receives $950 a month from the state for each child in his care. He used that money to cover gambling debts. He sold Jack Dawson's motorcycle, a 2004 Harley Sportster, the bike Jack rode on Route 89, the bike that carried him into fire, to a dealer in Camp Verde for $1,800. She paused. Then he filed a missing child report calling Maya unstable and a flight risk, so the state would bring her back. The crowd's silence changed. It thickened. It became something with teeth. A man in the 3rd row stood up. Then another. A low, rolling sound. Not a shout, but a growl. The collective sound of 300 people learning that a child had been exploited and a dead man's legacy had been sold for pocket change. Madre Elena raised her hand. The sound stopped. "But Maya is not alone anymore." She nodded to the side of the stage. "Duke." 2 Iron Aces members pulled the tarp off the trailer. Beneath it, gleaming in the afternoon sun, sat a motorcycle. Chrome pipes, worn leather seat, the Devil's Canyon rider's emblem on the tank, hand-painted, faded, real. Jack's Harley. Maya saw it and her knees buckled. The sound that came out of her was not a word. It was something deeper, a sob that started in her chest and tore through her whole body. The kind of cry that only comes when something you thought was lost forever is suddenly, impossibly, in front of you again. She pressed both hands over her mouth, but it didn't help. Tears streamed down her face. Her shoulders shook. 3 days of walking, 3 days of silence, 3 days of holding everything inside. And it all broke at once. Madre Elena knelt in front of her, right there, on the stage, in front of everyone. She took Maya's hands, calloused, blistered, the hands of a girl who'd fixed strangers' cars and changed old men's tires and given away her last dollar. Elena held them and looked into her eyes. "Your father saved lives on the road," she said. "You saved your own life getting here. Now let someone take care of you for a while." She paused. The crowd held its breath. "I've retained a family law attorney. I'm filing a petition for legal guardianship. If you'll let me, I'm going to take care of Jack's kid, the way I should have from the beginning." Maya, who had refused soup money from a waitress, refused a ride from 8 bikers, refused every hand extended to her for 3 days, collapsed into Madre Elena's arms. The crowd went silent. Then it erupted. 300 people on their feet, and the sound that filled that fairground was not applause. It was something rawer, relief, fury, love. The sound of people who'd just watched a kid get caught. At the edge of the stage, Duke Harlan stood with his hands at his sides. Tears ran into his gray-streaked beard. He didn't wipe them away. He didn't deserve to. Backstage was a canvas tent that smelled like dust and electrical tape, a folding table, 4 plastic chairs, a speakerphone in the center, buzzing faintly with the static of a live connection. Madre Elena sat at the head. Her attorney, a woman named Davis who spoke in short, precise sentences, sat beside her with a legal pad. Duke stood in the corner, arms crossed, taking up as little space as a barrel-chested man could manage. Cal leaned against the tent pole, fidgeting with his keychain, and Maya sat in a plastic chair with her hands in her lap, still wearing the jacket, still red-eyed, still shaking slightly, but present, listening. The DCS supervisor's voice came through the speaker, professional, careful. "We've received the formal complaint and the supporting documentation from your attorney. Mr. Pruitt's license has been flagged for emergency review. A caseworker and a deputy will conduct an unannounced home visit within 48 hours to assess the welfare of the 2 remaining children." "The children's names are Marcus and Sophie," Madre Elena said. "Marcus is 11, Sophie is 8. I want you to know their names." A pause on the line. "Noted, Colonel Reyes." "We take these reports seriously," the supervisor added. "You'd better." Madre Elena's voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. Because 300 riders and a documented paper trail say this can't wait. The call ended. Davis made notes. The tent was quiet for a moment. The held breath, quiet of people who've just set something in motion that can't be taken back. Duke cleared his throat. "The Iron Aces Chapter Fund is committing $15,000 toward Maya's guardianship legal costs and any proceedings against Pruitt." He looked at Maya. "That's not a gift. That's a debt. Your father saved my brother's life, and I repaid him by mocking his daughter in a diner. This is the beginning of making that right, not the end." Maya met his eyes. She didn't nod. She didn't thank him, but she didn't look away either. And for Duke, that was enough. More than enough. Then Duke turned to Cal. The young man straightened against the tent pole, his nervous hands going still for once. Duke studied him. The patchy beard, the worn boots, the kid who'd spent 2 days on the road watching over a girl he didn't know, because something in him recognized something in her. "You saw what the rest of us missed," Duke said. "You grabbed my arm in that diner when nobody else would have. You followed that girl for 50 miles and you didn't push, didn't crowd her, didn't try to be a hero. You just showed up." He reached into his vest and pulled out a patch. The full Iron Aces emblem, stitched and real. "You're not a prospect anymore, Cal. You're one of us." Cal's eyes went bright. His jaw worked. He took the patch with both hands, and for a moment he just held it, staring at the stitching like he was reading something written in a language he'd waited his whole life to understand. A kid who'd aged out of foster care with nothing now had a family that wanted him. He looked at Maya. She looked back. 2 foster kids in a canvas tent, both holding something they'd been told they'd never have. The tent flap rustled in the evening breeze. The rally sounds, engines, music, voices, filtered in from outside. But behind the stage, in the fading light, Maya Dawson walked to her father's motorcycle. She put her hand on the gas tank. The metal was warm from the sun. She could feel the faint vibration of the engine's memory in the chrome, the ghost of 1,000 rides, the echo of her father's hands where hers rested now. She didn't speak. She didn't cry. She just sat down on the ground beside the bike, leaned her shoulder against the front tire, and closed her eyes. Quiet, still, finally at rest. 3 days later, a white sedan and a Yavapai County Sheriff's cruiser pulled into the driveway of a beige stucco house on Elm Street in Cottonwood, Arizona. 9:17 in the morning, the lawn was mowed, the blinds were drawn. A mid-range sedan sat in the carport beside a recycling bin that held more liquor bottles than a single man should go through in a week. The DCS caseworker's name was Linda Orozco. She'd been doing this work for 9 years, and she carried a clipboard the way a surgeon carries a scalpel, with purpose and without hesitation. The deputy hung back by the cruiser, hands on his belt there in case he was needed. Pruitt opened the door in a polo shirt and khakis, and his face did what it always did, rearranged itself into the mask of a concerned, cooperative parent. He smiled. He invited them in. He offered coffee. Orozco declined. She was already looking past him. The house was clean enough on the surface. Pruitt kept it that way. He'd learned exactly what inspectors looked for, and he maintained the minimum. But Orozco wasn't here for a routine visit. She had Karen Harlan's documentation in her briefcase. She had a formal complaint on file. She had names. Marcus? Sophie? They appeared from the hallway. Marcus first, 11, thin, standing very straight, eyes on the floor. Sophie behind him, 8, smaller, one hand gripping her brother's shirt the way she always did. They were dressed. They were clean, but they were careful. Careful in the way that children learn to be when the rules of the house change depending on someone's mood. Orozco asked to see the kitchen. Pruitt led her there with his rehearsed confidence. The fridge held a row of condiment bottles, a half-empty carton of milk 3 days past its date, and nothing else. The pantry had a box of cereal and a sleeve of crackers. "I was planning to shop today," Pruitt said. His smile didn't waver. Orozco wrote something on her clipboard. "I'd like to see all the bedrooms." Pruitt's smile flickered. "The back room is storage. It's locked." "I'd like to see it, Mr. Pruitt." The deputy shifted his weight by the door. Pruitt looked at him, then at Orozco, and his face went through a calculation that didn't end well. He produced a key. The room held a 65-inch television still in its box, a gaming console, 2 cases of mid-shelf bourbon, a stack of unopened electronics, a tablet, a soundbar, wireless headphones, all purchased, Karen's records had confirmed, in the months the state had been sending Gerald Pruitt $2,850 a month to feed and house 3 children. Orozco looked at the room. She looked at Pruitt. She wrote on her clipboard. The children were interviewed separately in the living room while Pruitt sat in the kitchen with the deputy. Marcus answered in short, flat sentences, the voice of a boy who'd learned that saying too much made things worse. Sophie didn't speak at all. She nodded or shook her head. Yes, meals were sometimes skipped. Yes, he yelled. Yes, the house was cold in winter because the heat wasn't turned on. Their silence said more than words ever could. Orozco returned to the kitchen. Pruitt had abandoned the smile. His face was red. His hands were fidgeting with a coffee mug he'd never filled. "Mr. Pruitt, we have documentation from a child welfare advocate, a licensed attorney, and a formal complaint on file. Based on today's inspection and the children's statements, your foster care license is revoked effective immediately." You can't. That girl is a liar. She's unstable. I reported her. Marcus and Sophie will be placed in emergency care today. A vetted family in Sedona has already been contacted. Pruitt sputtered. He threatened lawyers. He raised his voice in the way he'd raised it 100 times inside this house when no one was watching. But someone was watching now, and his voice didn't carry the way it used to. The caseworker led the children to the sedan. Marcus carried a backpack. Sophie carried a stuffed animal with one missing eye. They climbed into the back seat without looking back at the house. They'd learned a long time ago that looking back didn't help. Pruitt stood in his doorway and watched the cars pull away. The lawn was still mowed. The blinds were still drawn. But the house was empty now, and so was the man standing in it. A small man in a polo shirt, stripped of the system he'd exploited, alone with a locked room full of things that would never fill the space where a conscience should have been. 1 month later, the Yavapai County Family Court approved Madre Elena Reyes's petition for legal guardianship of Maya Dawson. The judge signed the order at 10 in the morning. By 10:15, Elena had called Duke, Cal, Tommy, Karen, and her attorney. By 10:30, she was sitting on the front porch of her house near the Flagstaff Fairgrounds, watching Maya ride a dirt bike in slow circles through the empty lot across the road. Maya was getting better every day. Elena had started her on a beat-up 250 cubic centimeters trail bike, something light, forgiving, low enough to the ground that a fall wouldn't break anything important. They rode the back roads together on weekends, Elena on her own bike, Maya following, learning the lean of a curve, the feel of gravel under rubber, the way a throttle responds to patience rather than force. Maya didn't smile much during the lessons, but she listened with the same fierce attention she gave to everything. The attention of a girl who understood that skill was the one thing nobody could take from you. She was enrolled at Flagstaff High School. She had a bedroom with a door that locked from the inside. Elena had made sure of that because she understood what it meant to a foster kid to control who entered their space. Maya kept the room spare. A bed, a desk, her father's jacket hung on a hook by the door. She did her homework without being asked. She was still guarded, still independent, but she was beginning to trust, in small, cautious increments, the way a person learns to put weight on a leg that's been broken. And while Maya was learning to ride, Duke and Madre Elena were building something larger. The joint meeting happened on a Saturday afternoon at the Devil's Canyon Riders Flagstaff Clubhouse. It was historic. The first time the Iron Aces and the Devil's Canyon Riders had ever shared a room for anything other than a funeral. 2 chapter presidents, 40 riders, and an attorney with a stack of incorporation documents. Madre Elena spoke first. She laid out the mission in the same controlled, precise voice she'd used to command Marines. The Dawson Ride Home Foundation would provide emergency support and legal advocacy for Arizona foster children, funds for kids aging out of the system with nothing, legal aid for guardianship transfers, and a rider volunteer mentorship network, pairing MC members with at-risk youth, giving them what Cal had been given, what Maya had been given, someone who showed up. Then Duke took the podium. He was quieter than anyone in that room had ever heard him. He didn't perform. He didn't command. Jack Dawson rode into fire for strangers, he said. The least we can do is ride for kids who've got nobody. Seed funding. $40,000 pooled from both chapters, plus a personal donation from Tommy Harlan, the man Jack had pulled from a burning wreck 12 years ago, now helping to save the legacy of the man who'd saved him. Maya sat in the 3rd row, next to Cal. She wore the jacket. Her hands were still in her lap. She didn't speak, but she smiled. A real smile. Unguarded. The first one in this entire story. The kind that starts in the eyes before it reaches the mouth. The kind that a girl who's been carrying the weight of the world for 2 years can only produce when she finally sets it down. The 2 chapter presidents shook hands at the front of the room. Cameras flashed, riders clapped, and something permanent was made. Not just a foundation, but a promise that what happened to Maya Dawson, what happened to Marcus and Sophie, what happened to Cal, would never happen to another kid without someone riding to meet them. Jack would have understood. The road gives back what you put into it. 1 year later, a Harley Sportster rumbled into the gravel parking lot of the Cactus Flat Diner outside Cottonwood, Arizona. The rider was 16 years old, taller now, stronger, sun-browned from a year of weekend rides through the high desert. She swung off the bike with the easy confidence of someone who'd learned to trust her own balance, pulled off her helmet and shook out her hair. Behind her, a pickup truck pulled in and parked. Madre Elena at the wheel, window down, watching with the quiet satisfaction of a woman who'd fulfilled a promise she'd made to a dead friend. Maya Dawson walked toward the diner wearing her father's leather jacket. It fit better now. The sleeves no longer needed to be rolled. The hem hit her hips instead of her thighs. The leather was still scarred, still oil-stained, still carried the fading ghost of drugstore cologne, but it sat on her shoulders like it belonged there, because it did. She pushed through the glass door. Donna saw her first. The waitress was behind the counter. Same spot, same compression stockings, same pencil behind her ear. And her hand went to her mouth. Her eyes filled instantly, the way eyes fill when you see proof that something you prayed for actually came true. She didn't say a word. She didn't need to. The girl she couldn't protect had walked back in as someone who no longer needed protecting. Maya sat at the same counter stool. She picked up the menu. "I'll have the cheeseburger," she said, "and a Coke, and a slice of pie if you've got it." Not soup. Not this time. In the back of the diner, same table, same corner, Duke Harlan sat with two of his guys. He'd been watching since the Sportster pulled in. He stood slowly, removed his hat, held it against his chest. Maya looked at him across the room. He nodded. She nodded back. No words, no apology, no dramatic forgiveness. Just a nod from a girl who'd decided after everything that a man who'd spent a year trying to earn it deserved that much. And Duke understood. A nod from Maya Dawson was worth more than absolution. The Dawson Ride Home Foundation had helped 32 foster children in its first year. Emergency housing, legal aid, mentorship rides. 32 kids who'd been where Maya had been. Alone, invisible, walking a road nobody thought they'd survive, and found someone waiting at the other end. Gerald Pruitt was convicted of stipend fraud in Yavapai County Court, 18 months. His foster care license was permanently revoked. The locked room full of electronics had been entered into evidence. The jury deliberated for 40 minutes. Marcus and Sophie were adopted by their emergency placement family in Sedona. They had a backyard now and a dog and a refrigerator that was never empty. Marcus played baseball. Sophie had started talking more. Cal volunteered full-time in the foundation's mentorship program. He rode with 3 different foster kids every week, stayed a respectful distance, didn't push, didn't try to fix them, just showed up, the way he'd shown up for Maya. Maya carried a 3.6 GPA at Flagstaff High School and ran the motorcycle maintenance club she'd started in the shop classroom. 12 members. She taught them the things her father had taught her. Tire pressure, oil changes, chain tension, the quiet dignity of knowing how to fix what's broken. Madre Elena watched from the truck as Maya finished her meal, left a tip on the counter, and walked back into the sunlight. The girl climbed onto her father's bike, kicked the engine to life, and pulled out of the parking lot onto the highway heading north. The Devil's Canyon Rider's Patch caught the Arizona sun as she rode, the winged wheel, the desert flame, and beneath it, the name that started everything. SGT Jack Ironside Dawson. Jack Dawson once told his daughter that the road gives back what you put into it. Maya put everything into that road, her strength, her silence, her stubbornness, her father's jacket, and every last dollar she had. And the road gave her back a family. If this story moved you, subscribe, because every week we tell stories about people the world overlooked until it couldn't anymore.